What is up, guys? Welcome to yet another episode of Kicking It with Manny. On today's episode, I do have my amazing guest with me here, Kay.
Hi.
And we are talking about relationship red flags. We wanted to have an open conversation to share our thoughts on red flags that you have to immediately notice either getting into the relationship or whilst in the relationship. If they surface, you want to make sure that you're alert of this red flag so you can avoid it. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe, guys. Make sure you subscribe for more episodes like this. If you enjoy the content, you already know what to do. Hit the like button, drop a comment below, and let's dive into this. When it comes to red flags in relationships, in your experience personally, what are some red flags that you think it's like something to realize at the beginning stage of a relationship for either a woman to really like pick on?
Yeah. I think as a woman, something to kind of initially look out for is definitely how your partner handles their emotions in a high stress situation. Obviously, you don't really get to see that side of people until something big happens. Right. So if an event does occur or something happens that doesn't necessarily go their way, just kind of seeing how they handle that, because if it's going to be in a negative aspect, that's going to be something to look for down the line. Because if it's a situation that arises that doesn't pertain to you or have anything to do with you, and they don't handle it great, how are they going to handle real problems when you guys are more invested and emotionally charged, kind of from there. So
right. Yeah, I think being able to handle emotions like maturely is one of the things that really makes a big difference, because I will definitely agree with that, just because emotions are like a big part of the relationship. And if you're with someone who is not able to be matured about emotional management and they just go crazy, that's the kind of red flags to kind of like really notice too. And one thing I wanted to also add, I think it's also the level of growth the person has. The level of growth the person has also makes a difference with emotional management, because you want to make sure there's someone who is level-headed, who is able to reasonably think maturely and not just make really drastic decisions that really affect both of you guys in the relationship. What are some red flags that you've really noticed in past relationships that you think that should be shared so that women can be really aware of it, so they can really help them eradicate that during relationship process?
I would say for me personally, I had to really bite the bullet on being able to reflect on myself in certain situations when they were occurring and not always putting it on the other person. Not necessarily that I had a victim mindset, but when you're kind of like emotionally worked up and you're really in the heat of things, it's kind of hard to not always think it's somebody else's fault. So it's kind of just reflecting on past situations, things that have been said, whatever occurred, and just kind of being able to take your own ownership in that as well, and realizing that from the opposite end, like how you're feeling is how that person's feeling because of you as well. So I think that's also something to kind of keep an eye out for too, definitely. So
yeah, that's really necessary, being able to be like self-aware of what's happening. Definitely. One more thing I also wanted to add on top of that self-awareness part of the like things to notice when it comes to, I think a lot of times also, if you are with a person who is not able to communicate, be open about communication is really one of the biggest things, because some people don't even know how to communicate. Like they are too really loud, they are too like really upset to even like calm their emotions down to be able to have a conversation with someone. If there's a problem, hey, let's talk about it, let's dissect it. Let's be a team on this. And that's the biggest thing that I personally, on a guy's perspective, I feel like guys are very simple creatures. That if a person can have a very open conversation with you, they can openly communicate what is going on with them, then you can be easy, address the problem. But I feel like, so personally, if you feel like, do you feel like relationship aspect of things, like the communication part of it, do you feel like women struggle? Because I hear all this like videos online about how women don't know what they want, so they cannot communicate effectively about what they want. Do you think that is a red flag, that sometimes it could be coming from the women's side of things?
Oh, absolutely. And I've definitely been one to have been in that position and not really know what I wanted or how to communicate what I wanted. just based on whatever partner I have at that time. You know what I mean? I've been in pretty significantly long-term relationships. So it's just kind of being able to take that step back and have an understanding that how you react in certain situations, or what's triggering you or upsetting you, or why you're acting the way that you're acting in that moment isn't necessarily the same experience for the other person.
Makes sense.
And vice versa, because things that are going to be a big deal to me that I'm like very worked up over are not always going to be to that degree for my partner. Right. So it's also kind of going back to how you said, dissecting that situation and being able to express why you're acting the way that you're acting, or why you feel so heavily to the degree that you do about certain situations. Because not everybody's going to have that same perspective on it. So, you know what I mean? It's just being able to kind of take ownership in that aspect as well, and
that's a really...
come to a resolution, you know what I mean? To where it's like something that you went through that is going to be like severely triggering. I might have not experienced that, so I'm going to look at you and being like, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, you know what I mean? Like, so what's going on? And vice versa. So I think just kind of being able to have both people kind of step out of that box and like really dissect it from each side to kind of realize what's going on.
Yeah.
I think would make things a lot easier in bigger situations. So.
And so this question, it's really within this day and age, we are in that social media climate. It's like that's one of the things where for me, there are a lot of things with social media that is creating a lot of red flags in this day and age very easily. Yeah. So if you are with someone who is frequently, like, it's not a marketer, it's not like an analyst, it's not like a social media marketing where they're like doing their project or selling stuff online. But if you're with someone, or do you think if a person is too present on social media, do you think that could be a red flag to you?
I don't necessarily think being too present on social media is a red flag in itself. I think it's how you go about it in your personal life as well. So for me, I think this kind of goes back onto previous, conversations, stuff that we had. Like, if you're active enough to do it for, marketing yourself, marketing your job, stuff like that, you have to be able to integrate that same energy with your personal life as well. Totally. So I think that's kind of where the confliction comes up, where some people are private, and that's totally fine. I respect it. Social media is a rabbit hole in itself. It's a never-ending situation of things. So I think you just kind of have to keep the same energy across the board with everything. And also be open about the communication with it as well, because it leads to a lot of situations.
So a question. Because since you're the guest, I want to throw a lot of these questions at you.
Absolutely.
So if you are with someone, either at the beginning stage or in the relationship, and they start showing more skin, like exposing themselves more, like they start showing out bikini pictures randomly, like out of, or they start showing more, like, they're not like, it's different if you're like a fitness trainer or whatever, all these things are online, because social media plays a big part of a relationship. So if a person is showing more skin, like either the beginning part of it or either in the relationship, do you think it's kind of like a red flag observation that women or men should really like pay attention to, or do you think that there could be like a middle grounds with that?
For me personally, as somebody who has dated both sexes, female and male, I think it's handled a lot differently for each one. As sad as that is to say, like, it just is looked at differently. I don't necessarily think it's a red flag. I think it's definitely something to be a middle ground on and kind of have a conversation. Because if it's something that you're with somebody for 6 months, a year, whatever, you're still in the beginning, but you're significantly with that person. Right. There's obviously something else going on that could be a means for that they might not be comfortable asking about. So, or that you're just not listening to from the small things that they have tried to say. So if they need attention to a certain aspect, or, it could be something where they're trying to come into their own and be more self-confident and things like that. Like, I feel like that's a natural part of that process. So I don't necessarily look at that specific situation as a red flag. So
okay, that's good to know. Okay, and secondly, do you think if the opposite sex has more friendships with the opposite sex, like they have like more friendship with the opposite sex, and they have that best friend that they go to no matter what the situation is, they don't even talk to you, the person in the relationship with, about their problems that you're facing, but they find comfort in that best friend being the opposite sex. Do you think that could be a red flag that people should be looking out for?
I think yes and no. I think there's definitely situations where if I'm going through something that should be more directed to my partner, but I'm not going to my partner for that resolution or validating aspect of it, like that in itself is kind of a red flag, because you should be comfortable with somebody that you're with.
Exactly.
Depending on what the situation is, how long you've been together, you know, obviously those factors play into it, but there's also sometimes where it's like, I have platonic friendships, female and male, where it's like, you know, I've known this person for X amount of years.
Right.
I've seen them through different variations of a growing stage to where they kind of understand my perspective a little bit better.
Right.
So it's like, you know, there's friends that I have where I'm like, okay, I've been down and out with this person, so they've kind of have seen me at like my ugliest parts of life with my personality, so I'm going to already feel a little bit more comfortable with certain things talking to them because I don't necessarily have to have that wall up. Or it could be something where it's like I don't necessarily have to give such a backstory to my situation to have that venting aspect to this friend, where if it was with a partner that may not necessarily know that portion of my life, or, you know, something that went on or whatever, like I now have to divulge into this whole other scenario for you to kind of understand what's going on presently. So I think it's
don't you think it's important to be open with that person that you are currently with right now, to be able to allow them into this space of yours from the past, so that I mean, sometimes, I mean, it's just me personally, but don't you think it's necessary to really let that person into this place so that they can feel like, okay, I get where they're coming from, even at the beginning stage of just dating and everything else, just open this person up. If they really accept you for who you are, then it's a goal for you. But don't you think, instead of having that person to go to, I mean, you can still have them, but don't you think it's necessary to really allow this person, give them a background of where you've been, if you've done, you know, your past, whatever, all the fucked up situations, give them a rundown, see how they feel about it? Don't you think it's better to just allow them in, or you think it's just as good to like kind of like just be a little cautious about that?
I think from a dating aspect, it's, at least just for me personally, better to be more cautious than not. Okay. As somebody who's been through like a wide variety of things that many people have been through, those situations aren't always the easiest to bring up, and it's always kind of something where there's been prior times where you have tried to bring that up with maybe a past partner or something like that, and it's not always reciprocated in the best way.
Makes sense.
And then sometimes people react to those things being brought up in a not great environment. So it's kind of more of a negative connotation when it is just like a, hey, this is what I've been through, this is what I'm trying to explain to you, this is kind of like where I'm at, you know, mentally, emotionally, just so you kind of get it. Maybe you might not 100% understand it, but it'd just be a little bit easier to kind of figure it out, you know, when we are in those situations.
Right.
To where people have kind of like either thrown it in your face or have kind of brought it up in a light where, you know, it shouldn't be brought up like that.
Right.
So I definitely walk a very wary line of how much you tell people and how much you don't, and when to tell them. Like, somebody I'm dating for a month, I'm not going to tell them my whole life story.
Makes sense,
and then, you know, have that something be thrown up in my face at a later date, where it's like somebody that I'm friends with that has probably been kind of by my side at that point through those situations, and have seen it firsthand, or, you know, kind of experienced it with me while I was going through it. You know, it's going to be a lot easier and a lot more trusting. But then at the same time, too, when it's a friendship versus dating someone, situations are also interpreted like a lot differently.
So if it's more of a committed relationship and you guys are exclusive, it's okay to allow this person into this like old past of yours. But do you think also that there are some things that, even if you are exclusive with the person, do you think that there are some things about your past that you should keep private from that person knowing? Or because you think that could be a red flag if he has a past? I mean, if he obviously has an extreme past, like, hey, you had a kid from this woman and you never told me, whatever, and then you guys are exclusive, do you think those things are red flags? And this topic, which about body counts, If a person doesn't share their body count, is it a red flag or is it not a red flag?
No, I don't think it's a red flag at all. I don't. Just personally, I really don't. I think just for me, how I grew up, my understanding, especially being an adult, like if it's a consenting situation, you guys are both healthy about it, you know what I mean? You're making smart decisions with what you're doing and who you're doing it with. Like, I don't think a body count matters. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that obviously view it very differently.
Exactly.
And I mean, it is what it is. Like, who am I to tell you how to feel about that? Like, if you feel a certain type of way, like, nothing I'm going to say or do is going to change your perspective on that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's, I think, just kind of having that conversation. It's going to be something that comes up regardless. So just having that conversation with people who may not necessarily have the same view as you, but can kind of understand where you're at.
Right.
But for me, like, if you had sex with 5 people or 500 people, like, if it's healthy, you're good, you know what you're doing, everything was consensual, nothing was crazy, like, doesn't really matter to me at the end of the day. Yeah.
And if you are with a person, or if you're dating a person who is very secretive, who is very like on the phone, like they just keep everything very secretive, a person that has that kind of like behavior, do you think that's a red flag behavior for people to look out for?
I do. Yeah, I do more than I don't. Some people just have some stuff going on that exactly, kind of just piggybacking on what I said before, that you might not be with them long enough to really know that sort of situation. But I think as an entirety, like, if you're a secretive person, you don't really have, you know, any idea what's going on with, like, your work or your social life and stuff like that. And you're not really around the people that they're around all the time, or you're not involved in the things that they're doing all the time. And it kind of seems like, you know, you're a whole different section of life than what they're doing on the daily. Like, that's kind of where I see a red flag in that. And
what if the person is just, like, ideally a private person who don't want to, like, be sharing all these things? Even if they're with you, they still, you know, have that, they respect, or they feel like that is their boundaries that they want to keep. Don't you think that is, like, a reasonable place to be, or do you think that is still, like, a noticing red flag?
I do, to an extent. So I'm a very strong feeling of a difference between privacy and secrecy. And that's a very thin line to walk across.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's got to be some give and take to an extent.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you can be a private person and not have it be completely cut off or, like, so secret from your partner. You know what I mean? There's a difference in how you approach those situations and how that conversation is had. And obviously, like, when boundaries come up, like, you have to respect what's being out there, but I think you kind of have to practice what you preach, sort of thing. So if you feel that way about this situation, I'm going to then expect you to kind of handle all situations like that, regardless of what it is, if that makes sense. Like, if you're a private person, be a private person. But don't be private about your relationship or, you know, your family or stuff like that, but then be, like, so open about other things. Like, I think that's kind of where it almost becomes hypocritical at that point, and I think that's where a lot of issues come up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think a lot of what we've talked about today is really makes a lot of sense, and I think that is able to resonate with a lot of people, just because when you are getting into a relationship, I always say a relationship is a very it's a huge step to take in no matter what stage of life you're in. And totally. Being able to, like, analyze this red flags so you can avoid them at the early stages can help you, save you a lot of headaches, save you a lot of heartbreak. So if you're ever going through getting into a relationship, dating someone, these are some things that, guys, you can notice, you can realize. Some of the things may resonate better with you, some of the things may not. We all have different opinions, but I hope you guys have some value. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope the conversation was at least detailed enough with everything that we've talked about. So again, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, okay? Make sure you subscribe, guys. Follow us on all of our social media platforms, Kicking It with Manny. I will include her IG. If you want to follow her, whatever, guys, go ahead and do it. But I hope you guys enjoyed. It was a pleasure being able to, like, vibe with you guys, have an open conversation like we do always. And guys, we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Cheers.
Peace.